All right, hello everyone. Hi guys. Hope you're having a good Chuseok or had a good Chuseok, depending on when you're watching this video. So this is our video lecture that we are doing for the replacement class for that Monday. So I'm going to go through this lecture, this PPT on this video, and then you'll have an assignment to do, which I'll give more information about that in the LMS. So please check this current week, this lesson in our LMS under the module section or the lecture resources section, and you can find both of those, this video, PPT, and that assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get the PPT started. All right, so hopefully you can see that okay at the moment. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to get prepared if you're not already. So go ahead and get your speakers set up, your earphones, your headphones if you need to, Wi-Fi if you need to do that. And if you're going to be watching on your phone or your laptop, I recommend using a laptop, notebook, or iPad if you have one available. You're going to have better video and audio quality. So go ahead and take a few minutes and get yourself set up, get your earphones, make sure you're in a good Wi-Fi spot, and then we will get started. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Hopefully you guys can see and hear me okay. So like I said, this is going to be the replacement class for that Monday holiday, 10-2. So instead of having a makeup class at the end of the semester, we are doing this video lecture that you guys have chosen to do. So in order to get attendance, you must do a couple of things. You must watch the entire video lecture that is required, and you must also complete the assignment that is listed in the LMS as well. So both of those deadlines will be listed in the LMS. It should be about a week before our next class when you have to complete that. So please check that, make sure that you understand when you need to finish watching these videos and that assignment by. I recommend just knocking it out as soon as possible, especially if you have a notebook or laptop. You could just press play and carry on. So this is a department policy. There is no flexibility on that. If you do not watch the video in its entirety or do not complete the lesson, there's really nothing I can help you with there. It's pretty simple, guys. So go ahead and get that done and have nothing to worry about. So today we are talking about elasticity. Okay. So elasticity, let me go ahead and get that pointer off of there. So elasticity. So let's talk about that word, just the basic meaning of elasticity. Maybe some of you know that word, maybe some of you don't. So we'll go ahead and cover that. So number one, what do you think of when you hear the word elastic? Maybe something comes to mind that you've envisioned before. It could be related to economics. It could not, right? The main thing I think of when I think of elastic is clothes. A lot of like elastic waistbands or rubber bands, things like that, something that's flexible or changes. So what do you think of, question number two, when you hear the word inelastic? Well, obviously that's going to be the opposite of elastic. All right, so something is elastic, you think is stretchy, something is inelastic is very firm and tough. So basic definition of elastic as we know it in our everyday lives is able to encompass a variety of change. It's flexible and it's adaptable. So think about, like a rubber band is very elastic. We see elastic waistbands and elastic clothes, elastic bouncy balls, those kinds of things. So this is a basic concept. This doesn't have to do anything with economics, but just understanding the meaning of the word. Think about if you apply force to something or change it, right? How flexible is it? How much change can happen as opposed to not happen, elastic or inelastic? So hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're talking about today, because we're going to be talking about elasticity of demand. So we know price and demand are related. So let's talk about that. So again, elastic, Think about something that's very flexible. So think about demand as flexible, okay? And then inelastic, something that is not very flexible, okay? So you're not going to be able to change it much regardless of how much pressure you put on it. So let's talk about how we're going to use this in the terms of economics. Okay, so how price affects the quantity demanded. So that's what we're talking about with elasticity today. So a change in price, how does that affect demand? And in which direction, by how much, and what variables affect that? So commonly you see, for example, let's say the price of gas, right? If the price of gas goes up, how is that going to affect the demand for gas? Well, obviously, many of you would say that the gas demand, quantity demanded of gas, will go down. And that's correct. But elasticity is talking about how much, right? How much per price point in relation to other variables will that flexibility be achieved or affected in the demand for gas or the quantity demanded. So we're going to talk about it's not standard, right? It's elastic. There's a range to it. And this allows us to compare different products, different industries, different firms, how elastic things are. It helps us determine total revenue. If price changes, how is quantity demanded going to change? So it actually has some real world applications to it. So the elasticity of demand. What are we talking about? So elasticity is a measure of how much consumers respond to changes in these variables. So again, consumers vote with their dollars, right? They vote with their quantity demanded depending on the price. So it's a measure of the responsiveness of the quantity demanded or the quantity supplied, which we will talk about later, which is due to a change in one of its determinants. So price elasticity of demand is what we're going to focus on today, otherwise known as PED, price elasticity of demand. So how much the quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in the price of that good. So again, we're talking about a range, right? How much does that quantity demanded change according to each price? It's usually not just a simple 1-to ratio. It usually depends on the price. So each price point is going to have a different elasticity or price elasticity of that demand. So price elasticity of demand, or PED, is the percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. And that's the basic equation that we're going to work with today. So percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. This measures how willing consumers are to buy less of the good as its price rises. So goods are going to be different, right? So, maybe the importance of gas compared to the importance of buying alcohol, right? One of those is going to be more important to a consumer. So this is going to measure how willing the consumers are to buy less of a good as the price goes up. So elastic demand is the quantity demanded responds substantially to changes in price. So elastic, think about elastic is more flexible. So the quantity demanded responds substantially to a change in price. So if there's a big change in price, there's going to be a big change in demand. That's that elastic demand. Inelastic demand, on the other hand, is the quantity demanded responds only slightly to a change in price. So if there's a change in price, that quantity demanded is small. It's more rigid. It's more solid. So inelastic. So when we have elastic is very flexible and inelastic is very inflexible. So let's take a look at a couple basic, simple examples to get this concept understood. So first, elastic demand. What is elastic demand? So we have here Pepsi, all right? Product of Pepsi, let's say the price increases by 2 times. It doubles. Reason doesn't matter. Suddenly the price goes up. So what will happen to demand of Pepsi? Obviously, as price goes up, demand will go down, right? Why? Okay, because there are other substitutes. Pepsi is a product, but there are many different alternatives to Pepsi. Okay, so there's going to be like Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew, you have your ciders, Sprites, Fanta, all of that stuff. So if the price goes up a little bit, there's going to be a huge change in demand because there are other substitutes. So that type of product is going to have a very high elasticity of demand. All right, so it's going to have a high elasticity of demand. So let's talk about something, the opposite side of it, inelastic demand. So here is just a concept of food, right? Doesn't really matter. It's just food, food that we need to eat to survive, sustenance to live on this planet. So let's say the price increases by 20% suddenly. That's a pretty big increase in the price of food. Well, what will happen? Okay. And why? Let's talk about that. Will demand go down? Maybe, probably demand will go down a little bit, but not much because there are no other substitutes because we need food. All right. We don't need Pepsi, but we need food. We need food to survive, to live. So that is an example of inelastic demand. That's going to be very rigid. So a price goes up, the change is small. Compared to a price increase in Pepsi, the change is going to be big in demand. So two basic concepts there. Let's talk about those in further detail, starting with what determines the price elasticity of demand. So what is going to cause or give us an indication of that elasticity? Is it very, very elastic, or is it very inelastic or more rigid? So let's talk about the first one, which we've already kind of mentioned, the availability of close substitutes. All right, so goods with close substitutes have a more elastic demand. So what does that mean? Well, just like we talked about with the Pepsi and the Coke, right? So soda, Coke, Pepsi, all of the other variants of that type of product, that's going to be a lot of options for us. So if consumers have a lot of options, all right, that demand is going to respond drastically to an increase in price. So that's going to be a determining factor of the price elasticity of demand. So goods without a close substitute are going to have less elastic demand. All right, so if there's not many options available for consumers, obviously that demand is not going to change much. Example, cars for Americans. So in America, there's not a lot of public transportation. It's very wide, so you can't walk places. Like it's not common to walk to work or take taxis. There are some cities that have buses and some cities that have subways, but most people have cars. They need a car to get to work, to school, home. So, for example, gas prices, right? If gas prices go up in America, people are still going to drive their cars, right? Because they don't have many other options. There are no close substitutes. All right. Another determinant of the price elasticity of demand is it a necessity or a luxury? Right? Necessity, like we talked about with food, is going to be very inelastic. For example, water. There are very few alternatives to water. There are zero alternatives, right? So that's going to be a very inelastic or rigid price elasticity. That's going to really not really change the demand. If there's a change in the water price, people still need water compared to luxuries, which are very elastic. All right, so think about going to a movie theater. You don't need to go to a movie theater if you're just looking for something to do or trying to have fun. There are other options available. So, yes, you can go to a movie theater, but if the price of the movie ticket increases, well, maybe you're going to do something else. All right, so maybe you watch a show on Netflix, or maybe you go and you see a concert, or maybe you just go to a park, you do something that's a little bit more affordable, something like that. So because that's not necessary, that's going to have a more elastic demand. So an increase in price, that demand is going to go down. Another determinant of the price elasticity of demand is how it is defined in the market. Okay, so let's talk about two concepts of narrowly defined and broadly defined. A very narrow or specific defined market is going to have more elasticity, right? So for example, Breyer's vanilla ice cream. So that's very specific. Why? We have ice cream, we have the flavor of the ice cream, and we have the brand of the ice cream. That's a very specifically defined market. So Breyer's, very delicious natural vanilla ice cream. Are there other options to this? Yeah. So consumers can easily find other kinds of flavors or desserts because that definition is very specific. So we get more specific with each variation. So we have ice cream, it's pretty broad. Vanilla ice cream, okay, that's a little bit more specific. And then Breyer's, the brand, Breyer's vanilla ice cream. So that's very specific definition of the market. That's very narrow. So that means that elasticity is going to be more elastic. And then Opposite of that is a broadly or less specific defined markets. So that's going to have less elasticity. For example, fruit, right? Just fruit. Fruit is a pretty broadly defined market. There are lots of types of different fruit. Okay, we're not getting very specific. We're just talking about all the fruit that is available in the region or in the country or in the world. That's very broad. Okay, so that's going to have a less elastic demand. It's kind of a mouthful to say over and over again. So you cannot easily find a substitute for fruit, right? It's not really possible. If you want fruit, you have to eat fruit. There's no other options for fruit. Sure, you can have some vegetables and things like that, but the nutrients and the flavors and the things that you get from fruit cannot be substituted for other things. So if it's very broadly defined, it's going to be harder to find substitutes for that. So if it's very narrowly defined, it's going to be easier to find substitutes for that. So the definition of the market depends narrowly defined or broadly defined. Another determinant of price elasticity is the time horizon. So how long, right? How long do we have? So the demand is more elastic over long time horizons. Okay, so we can change, it's easier to change over a long period of time, change our consumer habits over a long period of time compared to a very short window. So let's take a look at short time horizon. A short time horizon is going to be less elastic. Okay, so if gas prices suddenly go up like tomorrow, well, what are you going to do? What are your options? Okay, you can take reduced number of trips. So maybe you don't drive anywhere on the weekend or you don't drive anywhere at night. You stop taking unnecessary trips or you take a bus. Okay, so that's going to be less elastic. The demand is still similar, but gas prices go up. You don't really have a choice. All right, let's compare that to a longer time horizon. Okay, so longer time horizon is going to be more elastic. So let's say gas prices go up. Well, let's gas prices go up, and then maybe we're talking, let's talk about 6 months later, a year later, right? Time horizon. Well, if the gas prices go up, we have time, right, to do something. Maybe we decide that we're going to buy an electric vehicle or we're going to buy a more gas efficient vehicle. So that's going to be more elastic. All right. That's going to have more flexibility over a long period of a time horizon compared to a very short time horizon. When we don't have much time to decide as consumers, we can't really adjust our demand very much. But if we have a long time to change our behavior, then it's going to be more elastic. We have more options available to us. So short time horizon, long time horizon. And then the last one, number 5, is the share of the good in our consumer budget. Okay, so if it's a very low part of our budget, we don't spend much money on it. If the price of that changes, it doesn't affect your budget very much, right? So, for example, gum. All right, if you buy gum and gum goes up 25%, you might not even notice it. It's really not going to impact your life very much because it's such a low share of your budget compared to a large share of your budget. For example, if prices change, it's gonna affect your budget significantly. It's gonna hurt. You're gonna feel that. For example, gas prices again. So if gas prices go up, right, you're gonna feel that. All right, so that's gonna be it's gonna affect how you respond to that. So the demand is gonna be a little bit more important. Okay, so determinants of price elasticity of demand here. So those are kind of the 5 variables that can indicate the elasticity of demand. Now let's talk about computing these elasticities of demand. So we're going to get into the numbers here. All right, so let's jump into this. So computing or calculating the price elasticity of demand. So what is it? How do we calculate this? It's the percentage change in the quantity demanded. So this is percentage, this is delta or change, right? So we'll use percentage. Delta is the change, the difference in the quantity demanded, QD. So percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. So we have percentage change in price, so percentage delta of price. Okay, so we have percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. So Just a couple tips, hints here. We're going to use absolute values or absolute numbers. So we don't worry if it's a negative. All right, economists don't worry if there's a negative number in the equation. We just remove that from the equation because we know it's a pretty straightforward concept. You know, if price goes up, demand is going to go down. If price goes down, demand is going to go up. So we kind of know which direction we are going. So we don't need to use the negative numbers. If it comes out negative, you just remove that from the equation. So a way to look at this, price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in the quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. So another way to put that here, percentage change quantity demanded, percentage change price equals your price elasticity of demand. So let's take a look at an example. Very simple example here. We'll break this down in more detail later. So let's say there's a 10% increase in the price of ice cream cones. So ice cream cones go up by 10%. This causes the demand to decrease by 20%. It's natural. Price goes up. All right, demand goes down. So let's calculate that using this simple equation. All right, we have the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. So what does that look like? We plug that in. Okay, so 20% change in quantity demanded divided by a 10% change in the price. So what does that equal? That's going to give us 2. So that is our value for the price elasticity of demand. So how do we explain that, or how can we put that together in a logical sentence? What does that 2 mean? Well, basically what that means is for every 1% change in price, there's a 2% change in demand. For every 1% change in price, there is a 2% change in demand. All right, so that's how we're going to articulate that value. So continuing on here, we're going to talk about the midpoint method, which is a common way to calculate the price elasticity of demand. It kind of removes some unnecessary issues that might happen. And basically what we do with the midpoint is that we use the average of the first and second point. All right. So that's going to help us just get a clean value. So this allows the same answers regardless of the change in direction, if it's up or if it's down. So here we have 2 points, right? We have Q1, Q2, P1, P2. So that's quantity 1, quantity 2, price 1, price 2. So if we average those out, it gives us a nice clean equation. So price elasticity of demand here is the equation in its entirety. So let's walk through this real quick. So we have quantity demanded 2 minus quantity demanded 1 divided by quantity demanded 2 plus quantity demanded 1 divided by 2. So we're going to be finding the average here. So we have 2 quantity points. We're going to divide that by 2. That'll give us the average. We take that average and we divide it by this number here. All right. Then we do the same thing for the price. Okay, so let's start over here. So we have price 2 plus price 1. And then we divide those 2, which gives us the average price. And then we have the differences. So price 2 minus price 1, we're going to divide that by this function over here. So put that all together, and that's going to give us our price elasticity of demand. So let's walk through a little example. So an example moving from point A to point B. All right, we're just going to use some figures here. It doesn't matter what the product is. We're going to have a point A. So at point A, our price P1 is $4. Our quantity demanded is Q1 120. So at $4, the quantity demanded of this good is 120 units. And then we'll walk through the change. Point B. So we have a change in price at P2. It goes up to $6. So what happens to quantity demanded? It goes down to Q2 to 80 units. All right. So let's plug those numbers in. See what that gives us. So price elasticity of demand, here's our equation. So let's walk through this together. So we have 80 minus 120. All right. So up here we have Q2 minus Q1. So Q2 minus Q1 gives us that negative 40. We ignore the negative, doesn't matter. And we're going to divide that by Q2 plus Q1. So we have Q2 80 plus Q1 120. So that gives us a total of 200 divided by 2 here. So that gives us 100. All right. So that's the top part of our function. So that'll be 0.4. We can times that by 100 to give us a percentage of 40. And then we're going to divide that. So we take P2 minus P1. So 6 minus 4 is 2. We're going to divide that by this function over here, which is P2 plus P1. So we have P2, 6 plus 4 divided by 2, divided by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is what? 5. So what does that give us? 2. And again, 40%. All right, so what does this mean? So we take that 0.4 or that 40% and we divide those by each other. What does that give us? 1. So our price elasticity of demand is 1. And we'll start talking about what those numbers mean, below 1 or above 1. But right here, we see straight across that we have a price elasticity of demand is 1. So again, what does that mean? For every 1% change in the price, there's going to be a 1% change in the quantity demanded. All right, so we talked about 2 ways to compute this. So we talked about one is very simple. All right, one way to compute this is we take the percentage change of the quantity demanded over the percentage change of price. So basically you find the average of that and you'll have the price elasticity of demand. Okay, it's the same thing as the equation. It's just a little bit more condensed and simplified. So price elasticity of demand, percentage change in quantity demanded, percentage change in price. The other is the midpoint method, which we just talked about here in this equation. It's the same thing, basically. It's just a little bit more of a lengthy equation where we take these divided by each other to find that. You have to find the midpoint price and the midpoint quantity. All right, so whatever way you want to do it is fine. You just have 2 ways to find those. They'll give you the same result, but it's up to you. Commonly in the textbook, they're going to use the midpoint method. So let's move on from the computing elasticity of demand, and now we're going to talk about the variety of demand curves. So there are various demand curves that give us an indication of the price elasticity of demand. So we're going to be asking, how much does quantity demand respond to a change in price? So variety of demand curves. So let's take a look at how we talk about this. So number one, let's talk about demand. If demand is elastic, so remember we got those figures, right? We got the figure of 2, we got the figure of 1. Price elasticity is 2, price elasticity is 1. So demand is elastic. So when demand is elastic, price elasticity of demand is greater than 1. For example, that would be our first example we looked at, which gave us price elasticity of 2, right? So that's going to be greater than 1, meaning quantity demand moves more. So quantity demand is going to be more elastic. It's going to be moving more if it's greater than 1. Demand is inelastic if price elasticity is under 1. So if we get a figure of like 0.8 or 0.9, that's going to be less than 1. So that means that the quantity demanded moves less. So that's going to be more inelastic or more rigid. And then demand has unit elasticity if the price elasticity of demand equals 1. So if they are the same, for that 1 to 1, that means they're going to move equally. So that would be called unit elasticity. So what you remember here is elastic, okay, our PED is greater than 1. Inelastic, our PED is less than 1. And unit elasticity, our PED is 1 to 1, equal to 1. So let's talk about a couple concepts of elasticity, beginning with an extreme concept. If demand is perfectly inelastic. So perfectly inelastic is price elasticity of demand is 0. So what does that mean? A price change does not change the quantity demanded. Another way to put that, a change in price does not change the quantity that will be demanded of that good. So the demand curve is vertical. So you can see here an example. All right, so this is the demand curve. It is 100% straight, right? Exactly straight up, all right? So for an example, an increase in the price, it goes from $4 to $5, leaves the quantity demanded unchanged. It doesn't change it at all. This is a pretty rare situation. You have to think outside of the box to get an example for that. So think about an example, it's not realistic. We're just talking hypothetically. Let's say that you need to take a medicine every day. Maybe you have some health condition. So that pill that you need to take, you can only take one pill a day. All right. You can only take one pill a day. Let's say it expires after 8 hours. It's not good after 8 hours, whatever. So you can only take one pill a day and you can only buy one pill a day. All right. That's it. You can only take one pill a day. You can only buy one pill a day. If that price changes, are you going to buy more or less pills? No, because you can only take one pill a day and you are only allowed to buy one pill a day. So it doesn't matter what the price is, your demand is just going to remain the same, right? You're only going to need one pill a day. So that price elasticity is perfectly inelastic. The price change does not affect your quantity demanded at all. It's a pretty weird example, but that's hard to find for that situation. So demand is perfectly elastic. This is kind of the opposite of that. Price elasticity of demand is infinity. So price changes causes zero. It causes a zeroing out of the quantity of demand. So that means like kind of gets zeroed out, any price change. Demand curve is exactly horizontal. So if you look here at the example, so at any price, so here's our price at 4, all right, here's our demand curve. At any price above 4, the quantity is automatically zeroed out. So if it goes up from 4 to 5, demand goes down to 0. Nobody's buying anything. At a price below 4, the quantity demanded is infinite. So if the price goes down, right, it's going to be quantity demanded is infinite, which means it cannot be fulfilled. People are just going to keep buying it until it's infinite. So it'll go on forever. So the flatter the demand curve, so here's the key concept that's important to take from this. The flatter the demand curve, the greater the price elasticity of demand. So flat, right? So usually demand curves are diagonal, which we'll see later. So if that diagonal is flatter, okay, that's going to mean it's more elastic. And we'll talk about why here in a little bit. So a few elasticities from the real world. So you can see here, you can read through this if you want, but this is kind of just an example, not specifically accurate, but gives us a good concept of inelastic and elastic. So, for example, eggs are very inelastic. There's no substitute for eggs. You go up, continuing healthcare, all right, it's pretty inelastic. Cigarettes, okay, starting to get more elastic. Housing, beef, peanut butter, Mountain Dew, again, talking about soda pop, it's very elastic. There's going to be a lot of options available for soda or for pop. So that's going to see the range of inelastic to very elastic in a real world context. Let's talk about these demand curves. So perfectly inelastic demand, right? Elasticity equals 0. We talked about that. Price goes up, leaves the quantity demanded unchanged. So let's talk about elasticity of demand is less than 1. Okay, so if the price goes up, we can see that a 22% increase in price is going to have a decrease in the quantity demanded by 11%. So that elasticity is less than 1. Kind of see the curves here. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. So price elasticity, unit elasticity equals 1. So for example, price goes up, a 22% increase in price. Quantity demanded is going to go down by the same amount because it's unit elasticity. So it leads to a 22% decrease in quantity demanded. And let's take a look at elasticity is greater than 1. So if the price goes up from $4 to $5, we can see that the quantity demanded, so increase of 22%, all right, quantity demanded will go down to 67%, leads to a 67% decrease in quantity demanded. So elasticity is greater than 1. So that's going to be more elastic. And then a perfectly elastic, elasticity equals infinity, like we talked about. At any price above 4, quantity demanded is 0. At exactly the level the consumers want, all right, we can see the demand curve here. And then at a price below 4, quantity demanded is infinite. So basically what you need to take from this is the demand curve, is it steep or flat? So a steeper demand curve, price change will cause a smaller change in quantity demanded. So we can see that here, right? This is steep. This is our demand curve. And then a flatter demand curve, price change will cause a much larger change in quantity demanded. So you can see that laid out, or how that plays out here. So it's the original price, let's say. So if the price goes down, all right, quantity demand is going to go up, but not by much, just goes up a little bit compared to the price. All right, so again, if it's more flat or more elastic, so that's our original price point there. If price goes down compared to the price, the quantity demanded goes up a lot more. So that's going to be more elastic. So that's where total revenue comes into play, which we're about to talk about. So you can see not much and very much. All right, so steeper demand curve, price change will cause a small change. Flatter demand curve, price change will cause a big change in quantity demanded. So the elasticity of demand as it relates to total revenue. So now we actually get into some meaningful stuff as related to microeconomics. So total revenue of firms, of products, of companies. So the amount paid by buyers and received by sellers of a good. So that's total revenue. Another term for this is gross income. So the earnings before any costs are subtracted from that. So the price of a good times the quantity sold. So that's when we get our P times Q. So price times quantity. So price times quantity gives us our total revenue. For example, price is 4, quantity is 100 units, total revenue is 400. For a price increase, if demand is inelastic, total revenue increases. All right, you need to remember this concept. If demand is inelastic and flexible, total revenue increases. If demand is elastic, total revenue is going to decrease in any change of price. So let's talk about that. So first, let's take a look at our baseline here. So total amount paid by buyers and received as revenue by sellers. So we have $4 here, quantity 100, our revenue is 400. It equals the area of the box under the demand curve. At a price of 4, the quantity demanded is 100 and total revenue is 400. So let's see how this plays out in the next slide. All right, so the case of an inelastic demand, again, we have our 4 and 100. So let's say that move up to $5. All right, so our quantity goes down. Okay, so it's inelastic. Which is bigger, the blue colored section or the A colored section, right? The A colored section. So our total revenue is actually going to increase. So the case for elastic demand, okay, so we see here that if an increase in price goes from 4 to 5, our quantity demanded goes down from 100 to 700. So what does that mean? So the impact of change of the total revenue depends on the elasticity of demand. So in panel A, we see the demand curve is inelastic. So an increase in price leads to a decrease in quantity demanded that is proportionately smaller. So total revenue goes up from 400 to 500. All right, so this is smaller. This section is smaller than this section. But if it's elastic, like we've seen over here, demand curve is elastic, the increase in price leads to a decrease in the quantity demanded that is larger. So this section is larger than the increase in price. So total revenue is actually going to fall from 400 to 350. You can actually do those mathematics if you want and figure out total revenue. So just to visualize this a little bit better here, so you can see, so when the demand curve is inelastic, the extra revenue from selling at a higher price is greater than the lost revenue from selling fewer units. So we're selling fewer units, but we're making more money. Compare that to elastic demand. Okay, when the demand curve is elastic, the extra revenue from selling at a higher price is less than the lost revenue from selling fewer units. So that's not good. We're going to be losing money. So it gets to the question, is raising prices always good? And that's where we start to see some real world examples where this is useful. So the elasticity of demand, quick review. So when demand is inelastic, elasticity is less than 1, price and total revenue move in the same direction. Price goes up, total revenue goes up, or price goes down, total revenue goes down. When demand is elastic, the price and total revenue move in the opposite directions. So price goes up, total revenue goes down, or price goes down, total revenue goes up. If demand is unit elastic, total revenue remains constant, right? Price goes up, demand goes down, total revenue doesn't change. So linear demand curve is a constant slope that rise over that run, right? So we see that like 1/2. So different prices have different elasticities. So points with low price have into high quantity, there's inelastic demand. So low price, high quantity, that demand is more inelastic compared to points with a high price and low quantity, that's going to be more elastic. So looking at this, we're going to look at this this graph here, right? So up here in this region of higher prices, elasticity is larger than 1. Down here in these lower prices, all right, elasticity is smaller than 1. So the slope of the demand curve is constant, but elasticity is not. Okay, at points with a low price and high quantity, low price, high quantity, demand curve is inelastic. But if we have a high price and low quantity, demand curve is going to be elastic. So you can kind of see this laid out in this table here, which is related to that graph. The things you need to focus on, right? We have price over here, quantity, total revenue, percentage change in price, percentage change in quantity, and you can see that elasticity here. Okay, so at 7 or 6 higher prices, elasticity is going to be higher. When you get down to the lower price points here, quantity goes up, it doesn't really change as much. So it's going to be more inelastic. So you can kind of see these put together to give you some reference, right? The table here and the graph. All right, thing to remember is elasticity larger than 1 at higher prices. Elasticity is smaller than 1 at lower prices and high quantities. So other demand elasticities. Let's talk about what causes some of this elasticity. So income elasticity of demand, how much the quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in consumers' income. So percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. So this is talking about income elasticity of demand. So percentage change in the quantity demanded over the percentage change in income. So how much the quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in consumers' income. So if your income goes up or income goes down, how much is your quantity demanded going to change? You can find that by plugging those numbers into this equation. Well, let's talk about some other demand elasticities in terms of normal goods and inferior goods. Let's talk about why income may affect quantity demanded. So normal goods, we've talked about a positive income elasticity. So higher income equals an increase in quantity demanded. All right, we've seen that before. So necessities, things like necessities, things that we need are going to have smaller income elasticities. They're going to be more rigid. Well, why is that? For example, food, right? That's a necessity, okay? If we have higher income, all right, we're probably still going to buy the same amount of food. We might buy higher quality food. We might buy a little bit more, but we're not going to buy much more because you just can't consume that much. It is a necessity, but it's going to be a smaller elasticity. Luxuries, however, for example, your Gucci bags and things that you don't need are going to have larger income elasticities. Your demand, your income goes up. Well, suddenly you can start to buy things that you want, luxury goods, bags, laptops, cars, clothes, all of that stuff. All right, so that quantity demanded is going to go up as compared to food. Food is probably going to stay the same amount, but luxury items, your quantity demanded is going to increase because you have a higher income. That's a normal good. Let's talk about inferior goods, have the opposite or negative income elasticities. An increase in income causes less demand. A decrease in income causes more demand. For example, buses, right? If you make more money, your income goes up, you're probably going to use the bus less. Maybe you start taking taxis. If your income goes down, well, maybe you're going to take fewer taxis and start taking the bus more often. That's an inferior good. So the cross price elasticity of demand, how much the quantity demanded of one good responds to a change in the price of another good. So this is kind of comparing two goods together and how their price elasticity demand is correlated. So the percentage change in the quantity demanded of the first good divided by the percentage change in the second good. So comparing two goods, basically. So that would be this equation here, percentage change in the quantity demanded of one good divided by the percentage change in the price of good two, which we're not going to do any examples of that. Just going to try to get to the end of this section and finish up. So keep going, almost to the end. Let's talk about substitutes, all right, of demand elasticities. We've talked about this before, goods that typically used in place of one another. Hamburgers and hot dogs, all right? These are going to have positive cross price elasticity. The price of one good increases, demand for the other good increases. So simple example, hot dogs and hamburgers. If hot dog prices go up, all right, price of that one good increases, the demand for hamburgers is going to go up because people are going to be buying fewer hot dogs. So that's going to be positive cross price elasticity. Complements, goods that are typically used together. So for example, computers and software like Microsoft Office, Adobe, all of that stuff. This is a negative price elasticity. So the price of one good increases, the demand for the other good decreases. Okay, so if the price of computers goes up, the demand for software is going to go down because fewer people are going to buy fewer computers. So naturally, the demand for software will go down. So those are complements. So that's basically as far as we're going to get today for talking about elasticity, price elasticity of demand. If you need to run through some numbers, if you want to see some of those equations, I recommend this video from Dr. Azevedo, an economist professor that I really like. So I want you, if not, I don't want you to, but if you want to, you can kind of go through some equations with him. He does a good job of writing them out. It's kind of hard to write them out and discuss them on a PPT, especially a video lecture PPT. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and check out his video here. I recommend going to minute 19, and he starts going through those equations there, which gives you a good idea of price elasticity of demand. So that's basically it for today, guys. That is the video. So hopefully you got something from this. You remembered some stuff from it. Remember, the thing that you need to do is you need to do the assignment on the LMS, which will be pretty simple. So go ahead and get that taken care of and get your attendance automatically checked for that. All right, guys. Well, I hope you had a good vacation, a good holiday, all of that stuff. I will see you next time and have a good day. Bye-bye.